Welcome to the show, everybody. Micah with Coronavirus Diaries, and I am lucky and fortunate enough to speak again with Scott Bradley, the owner, operator of East Marine Asia Phuket, and currently he's over in Australia. Scott, for the viewers, the listeners that aren't familiar, do you mind sharing briefly, who are you, what do you do, and why are you in Australia?
Yeah, so as Michael mentioned, I'm Scott Bradley. I'm an Australian, obviously, back in Australia with my parents and my family, my 2 children and wife. My company's based in Thailand, in Phuket, East Marine and Precision Shipwright Services. We have a boat building facility where we do refit work. They're still operational at the moment. East Marine is open every day still with reduced staff, so rotation of staff at the moment. We have all the team in the factory continuing to work. However, some of them are actually living in areas where they can't actually travel to work now due to roadblocks from the army. So certain parts of Phuket now have been blocked off by the army, making it more difficult to move to and from work. And they're not allowing actually people to travel to and from work. They're saying you should stay home.
So curious, here in the States, in Minnesota, as the time of this recording, they're still considered essential workers. It's just they'll have different classes of types of work that are deemed essential, whether that's a healthcare worker, whether that's manufacturing, whether that's, certain types of stores, gas stations. As far as Phuket is concerned, the fishing industry was pretty huge out there. Are fishermen not are allowed to still do their work, or do you know how that's playing out?
I would imagine not, because there's no way that they can sell the fish. So if they catch fish, what are they going to do with them?
Right.
I know all the ports are actually shut, so the harbour clearance, no yachts are allowed to leave Thailand, and vice versa, none are allowed to come back in. So Malaysia's borders are closed, which is a border country, and Langkawi, which most yachts come in there and then come up to Phuket into Thailand. It's closed as well. You are still allowed to leave Malaysia if you're leaving, basically not coming back,
right,
and going to work. So if you've got a letter from an employer, or you're a non-resident, of course, of Malaysia, you can still leave. I don't think Thailand has that same law at the moment. I haven't heard anyone that's left in the last 2 weeks have basically locked in.
Right before we had started chatting, you had mentioned that there's a big super yacht that was it's stuck there. You know anything about what's happening with visas or travelers? I know that in the States they've said, hey, if you're still abroad, you should really get home now while you still can. Are you familiar with any people that have been stuck there?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of people that are stuck. The local Thai community, a lot of people have a real problem with food now already. So fast you wouldn't think it would happen, but even food for a lot of the local Thai, the very average families, obviously the poorer community are finding it and struggling very hard to get enough food now. So there is a fair bit of support going around through the social media. So luckily a lot of those people are starting to get help, and because a lot of them, it's just strange, but it's just quickly people don't save very well in Thailand. They don't plan very well ahead, so
just kind of go from day to day.
They don't have any income. They've got no money. They have a problem.
Yeah. So go ahead. Oh, I wasn't sure. There's a little bit of a lag.
Front, there's quite a few super yachts. There's quite a few super yachts that are in Thailand now, in Phuket especially, which can't leave. They're basically waiting. They can't get clearance. I suppose in an emergency they could leave, but at the moment everyone's sitting tight because they feel it's safer, just in case any further people get infected on the boats because super yachts have generally got 20 to 40 people on board.
A pretty big
Just crew
crew.
members, so quite a lot of people already. If someone gets infected, it's a confined area. And we've seen what's happened in Australia, particularly with the cruise ship.
That's still going on, isn't it? What's happening with that?
Yeah.
I haven't seen. I saw that they had started letting people off. Did they let everybody off, or what's?
Well, on the original one, they let everyone off without checking, and apparently the crew and the vessel knew that people were infected. Was kept quiet for a while and tried to, not our fault, it's not our fault sort of attitude. And now there's a big inquiry into it because I think there's 140 plus cases of coronavirus on the ship. So there was another vessel which is down south of Sydney now. I think they let it go in. They're treating patients. There's cases on that one as well. Ruby Princess, I think it's called.
Yeah, we had a number of those very similar things happen with cruise ships here in the States where, they went out, they were loaded up, and then, it was happening. These cruise ships were going on their tours or whatever. I don't even know what it's called, but the routes that they travel on, as the States was starting to inch into kind of the slow rollout of lockdowns. Curious, and you said you're between, is it Melbourne and Sydney?
Between Sydney and Brisbane, so we're in the north coast of New South Wales, sort of mid-north coast.
And you're a little bit out. You're far enough outside any major cities where there's not a whole lot of traffic. It's a smaller community.
Correct, 7,000 people here. Yeah.
So within is it called a state? Is it a state, or how does your county?
Yeah, New South Wales. We're in New South Wales as a state. There's obviously New South Wales, Queensland. So we're in the middle, sort of New South Wales. Sydney is sort of south. It's down towards the southern end, probably a quarter of the way up from the border. We're sort of midway up.
How is it working in Australia? With so in the States we have the federal government and then the states, and the federal government in many cases will give suggestions. Like right now, it's still an option for individual states to determine whether they're doing lockdowns or the extent of the lockdowns. How is Australia, the government and the states doing stuff?
Well, we do a similar thing. It's a similar thing. So obviously the major government, which is the Australian government, they look after the whole country, but the federal government does that, and then you've got all the local governments, which is like the government for New South Wales, government for Queensland, government for Victoria.
Sure.
They have their own power to change the rules a bit, but generally they're still under the same law or rule. But each state is actually still got slightly different rules and regulations going on at the moment.
Sure.
Victoria closed their schools before we did in New South Wales. Tasmania is a different ball game because they're an island sort of separated from Australia. So they obviously wanted to keep it out, but it got in there as well. And
I talked to one of my friends down in Tasmania. Sounded like they locked the whole place down, about 500,000 people on the island.
Yeah, yes. It's a big island though. It's not small. It's probably bigger than England,
Right. We're saying it.
I know it's big.
Island in the truest sense, it's just surrounded by water, but it's still big. So
yeah, well, that's probably what's safe where you are, in the same way we are. The country is so big, and the population per square meter in Australia, because it's such a big country and not too many people.
Sure.
The social distancing you're already social distancing normally because properties are rarer. In the big cities like Sydney, of course, some of the congestion areas like New York, you have more people around.
Sure.
But we're nowhere near the size, and as you know, with population.
So you're still able to get out. We were talking a little bit before we started chatting. You're still getting into fishing, and some nice fishing. I might add to anybody that didn't get to see this thing.
Fishing,
It just totally slayed this monster fish. It was awesome, but you're able to still get out and do that kind of stuff. Is there any talk about them limiting outdoor excursions, I guess, in your area?
Well, there is limitations on outdoor excursions. They've shut down most of the parks, so the kids can't go and play in a park. They're all
Wow.
closed off. You're allowed to walk around as a family, but not socialise with friends. So I think it's 2 people maximum. So one and one, like one family member from a different family, but that's it.
Sure.
So other than that, basically, if we want to go for a walk as a family, like 2, 3, 4 of us, we can, because we're living in the same house anyway.
Sure.
So we can go for a walk. But yeah, the social distancing part, you see it with people now. Everyone sort of stands back when you're near them. They're sort of like, yeah, don't get too close.
Yeah.
I even saw that when I first arrived back 4 weeks ago and went into a bank. One bank I went into, they were, "Oh, have you been overseas in the last 2 weeks?" And I happened to have been overseas to Thailand like 10 days prior. And as soon as I told them, yes, I was in Thailand 10 days ago, they jumped backwards 2 meters.
Yeah.
And they're already 2 meters away
Yeah.
to begin with. So, yeah, it sort of was freaking people out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably it's just the strangest thing. There's this unseen, I guess you could say, enemy out there floating around. We're aware of it, at least to the extent that media is going to talk about it, and at least to the extent that governments are going to share information. And we're just kind of out here just waiting for, what's going to happen. And it's just kind of slow moving. In the States, it's getting up to about 2,000 deaths a day, but a majority of those are New York and New Jersey. And then the rest is, the rest of the 50 states. They're all just kind of on this little slow climb. But, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next couple of months. Because even if like a wave goes through, eventually I just get this feeling like they're probably going to end up loosening restrictions and a little bit to see what happens, and then kind of let it go out a little bit more again, close, and then tighten things down until it's going to be just letting as many waves go through, but keeping the threshold below the access that we have to healthcare equipment and healthcare workers and that. So keeping it manageable, which is showing, I mean, in Minnesota right now, since right before I called you, the last I checked, it was like 40 people had passed in Minnesota, and there's like over 3 million people in just the metro area alone. So when you put it into kind of perspective, it's like, well, it's maybe not quite as significant as New York, but I mean, time's going to tell as far as what happens. Social distancing is working at this point.
Yeah, that's about the only thing, because until they find a cure, a needle or something, it's not going to help.
Yeah, there's some interesting information being passed around, but it's there's no cure per se right now. No. Have you heard anything about the quinine and the zinc? Is that being talked about much in Australia?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't heard about that, but I haven't watched the news. I missed the news last night. There's so many new developments going on and different things happening every day. And I mean, the way the schools are setting up now, originally it was like after Easter, because Easter weekend. Is it Easter in the US as well?
Yeah, this is when this was the big, hey, we're going to have things going good right now.
It's like going up at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, it is.
Well, we're getting better here. Obviously, the rates are reducing quite well in Australia now. So
good.
We did have a top day of around 300 from memory, and I think there was about 60 cases in the last 24 hours. So it's a lot better. So
that'll be good.
It has been over the last week or so. So it does look promising, but the government's also stressing, don't get too cocky and start going outside, and it all hits back again, and it might hit back worse if people get too anxious. But in general, people are pretty much got into the routine of it now and staying home. We go out, like Tick was going out every second day to buy shopping. Now she's going out twice a week, so like Monday and Friday.
Sure.
So just doing 2 shops to get food, just food.
What's the groceries like out there? Supply chain still up and running just fine as far as food wise?
Supply chain is still up and running, and obviously Australia, I don't know, their exports are going to reduce. So with export, I think 75% of Australia's produce gets exported.
Wow.
So there should be plenty of food.
You're going to be a vegan. What you're saying, you're turning vegan?
Well, that's the thing. When my wife goes shopping, because she just goes alone, because she wants to do it, and it's better we don't all go in a group. And so she
Sure.
just goes and does the shopping, and the fruit and vegetables is actually, to be honest, is what's mostly available.
Yeah.
Meat's basically getting pretty scarce in some parts. Beef is less than, I mean, there's still a bit of chicken and pork around, but beef is getting harder to get.
Do you
But
have
I don't
cattle
think
farms?
that will be long. Yeah, I don't think that will be long, but because we did have, luckily, because we had all the fires and then we had all the rain, and then the rains actually helped, even though it flooded a lot. People were still so happy it rained. So
Sure.
that obviously helped a lot of livestock in Australia. So
Great.
luckily that happened before this happened, because if it was still a drought and there were still bushfires and this happened, it would be like, maybe the bushfires would have burned the COVID away. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just like, we had a pretty bad run. I think a lot of the world, I think some parts of the US, you had a pretty bad run in the last couple of years as well.
Yeah.
With funky weather and strange things going on.
You know, it's
So
actually
the weather's been weird. Too many weird things going on, but it's, I mean, we live in a country area, so we don't notice so much about the air quality or anything here. I suppose when you look what's happening in China and some of the other places being shut down, it's like there's blue sky again.
Mexico City, and you were talking about dolphins before we jumped into our session. You were saying you'd seen some dolphins recently. That's in the there was an article about like the riverways in around Italy that like there's dolphins swimming around in them now, around Venice, I believe, as the water cleared up. And I mean, maybe they're there before. People just less people.
Less people in the water, I suppose, and I think nature comes back a little bit. You see it, like we see it on the river, it just seems a little bit more natural because there's not as many people around. But there's still a lot of the local people here are semi-retired, and they go fishing, as a hobby, and it's the best thing to do now.
Yeah, come on, like fresh air.
I mean, if you can't work, you might as well go out and do something rather than sit in the house, because it does get pretty boring. I'm teaching the kids, but that's finished today. So the last day of school was today for the term. So they've got 2 weeks holiday with Good Friday tomorrow, so the Easter weekend. And it also looks like the school is starting to prepare for the second term, which is, in Australia, it's our second term starting after Easter, which is on the 28th of April. I think they're already starting to plan for the online learning, because I got a message from the teacher, hope the online learning is going all right. It's great that everyone's sort of in the role of doing it now, and it seems to be working okay.
Yeah.
So it's like, it seems to be working okay. Well, what's going to happen next term? Well, they've already decided. They haven't said anything yet, but it's pretty much looks like it's decided that term 2 is going to be online learning for some part of it, if not all of it. Who knows?
You're going to have to ask when you get your teacher certificate. So you could do, are you going to be doing ESL certificate?
Well, it's actually not so bad to get a little bit into it as well, because I thought about it. If I was away on the yacht with the family for a few months, you could take the schoolwork away and do it. We could do it and download their schoolwork and do their schoolwork on board. Most of the areas you get Wi-Fi anyway, so it's going to be something maybe down the line will be handy to get a little bit of a start.
Some lucky kids, Scott, to be able to have that type of an experience where, they're getting cultural, going on the yacht. I mean, you talked the last time about why you had to leave the yacht in Phuket and actually fly down to Australia is because of all the ports and getting shut down.
Yeah.
But that'd be when it all opens up again. That I can only imagine that would be the best classroom you could ever be in, is you're cruising around.
Would be, and also I think when it does all open up again, everything's going to be much slower. People are going to move less, so everything's going to be way better. I think for a lot of things, the environmental side of things. I mean, just going to places where there would normally be more dive boats, there'll be less dive boats, less tourism. I think people are going to be pretty much staying home even after people are allowed to go away again. I don't think everyone's going to start booking holidays in the first week. Airlines, how are they going to move?
No.
I mean, I saw one video with all the American Airlines planes. There was like 80 or 90 of them just grounded, just all the way up the runway. It was like, so how long is it going to take once things settle down enough for them to say, oh, let's just start doing all those flights again. That can't happen in one day.
People got to have that money. People got to have the
Yeah,
money to buy the flights
again.
and pay for the vacations. And
yeah, and then employ the people to fly the planes again or whatever they've done. I mean, if it goes for months, it's not so easy just to say, everyone back to work tomorrow. We're starting to fly again.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen that fast.
It's probably
the
going to
planes,
be...
What happens with the planes when they've been grounded for months? They have to be tested and serviced. I mean, this hasn't really happened. Not many airlines will have a plane that's doing, flights every day that they're going to ground for months.
It's a really good point. I mean, 9/11, we saw a bit of planes being grounded, but it didn't last long at all. It was fast, short-lived, not months. And
I don't know what the engineers side of it. I suppose can keep them maintained, but they still need to be flown to be maintained and tested. To say, we'll change that, and it's all done. But I don't know all that side of it. I can imagine it's still going to be a very slow process. I mean, everyone said in the beginning, like in Australia, maybe a month, everything's going to shut off. But now they're talking 6 months, and when they talk 6 months, that could mean a year.
Yeah,
it could be longer before everything. I mean, nothing's ever going to be back to normal, is it? People are going to be worried about a virus.
It'll be the new normal. The new normal is going to be a very different place than right now, and I think we're just starting to get our feet wet with like kind of the extent of what this really means. And eventually we'll get back to the new normal, or we'll get to the new normal, and hopefully it'll be somewhat similar to the way of life that we all had once shared. Like there'll just be some new considerations in place, but
well, all the other, I mean, back in the early 1900s when the Spanish flu went through, I mean, that's all gone, I believe. No one can get that now. I don't know. But I think they got a vaccine for that, did they? I don't know. But it's, with all the newer flus that we've had, the H1N1 virus, and there was a chicken flu that came out, and all those different ones that went through in the last couple of decades, everything seemed to just get forgotten about. But I think the swine flu and all those sort of flus, I think people still get that. It's not because it's gone. And
Scott, I don't want to cut you off, Scott. I am realizing we chatted a little bit before we started this session, and due to the limitations on Zoom, we have less than a minute right now. So I want to just sign off really quick, and then we can connect and just catch up a little bit briefly. But so for all the viewers, listeners, Scott, this was awesome. I would have loved to go a little bit further down this. We'll have to remember that for next time, is just start recording and start talking. But it was good to touch base with you. Really interesting to see the kind of what's happening with Australia and the insights into Thailand. I know Tick, I'm sure she's still talking with friends, family over there. So it's interesting to get those insights as well. Viewers and listeners, anybody that wants to know any more about East Marine Asia, check out the About comment or the About section down below, and you can find all your yachting needs. But until next time, Scott, thank you again for being on this session of CoronavirusDiaries. And for all the viewers, listeners, stick around. We got more stuff coming your way soon.